There are moments when nothing needs to be said out loud for the message to be understood. No interviews, no captions, no carefully worded statements posted to social media. Just a shift so noticeable that everyone watching feels it immediately. That is exactly what happened when it became clear that Melody Shari had taken a legal step behind the scenes. There was no public announcement, no dramatic reveal, and no attempt to guide public opinion. Instead, the message came through formal legal action, and that alone marked a turning point in how this long-running situation must now be understood. Once lawyers become involved, the tone changes instantly. What once lived in the world of reality television drama, emotional commentary, and online debate now exists in a space governed by boundaries, documentation, and real consequences. For years, the dynamic involving Melody Shari, Martell Holt, and Arion unfolded almost entirely in the public eye. Fans followed the story through interviews, social media posts, and indirect commentary, often fueled by emotion and speculation. Opinions were shared freely, narratives shifted constantly, and reactions happened in real time. But legal action removes the conversation from that arena. It replaces feelings with facts, reactions with evidence, and impulsive responses with calculated decisions. This shift matters because it signals that what was once tolerated, ignored, or brushed off has reached a point where silence alone is no longer enough. This moment did not come out of nowhere. It has been building slowly, quietly, over a long period of time. After Melody and Martell's divorce was finalized, many people believed that chapter had finally closed. From the outside, it appeared that Melody had chosen to move forward with her life. She focused on raising her children, expanding her businesses, and rebuilding her sense of self outside of the marriage and the public scrutiny that came with it. She stopped responding publicly to rumors, she stopped addressing accusations, she stopped engaging in online back and forth that once kept her name tied to constant controversy. To many observers, it looked like she had chosen peace. But silence does not always mean absence. Sometimes silence is observation, sometimes it is strategy, and sometimes it is preparation. While Melody remained publicly quiet, the conversation around her never truly stopped. Martell continued to reference her in interviews, often positioning himself as misunderstood or unfairly judged by the public. Arion-Curry's social media presence also began to shift in tone over time. Captions, reposts, and statements suggested frustration, truth-telling, and feeling silenced. Initially, many fans dismissed these moments as personal expression, but as time passed, the consistency became harder to ignore. Patterns began to emerge. Posts appeared at specific moments. Statements seemed aligned with Melody's public milestones, such as business achievements or moments of visible success. Mentions were repeated, timing became noticeable, and when behavior repeats itself over an extended period, it no longer feels accidental. From a legal perspective, this distinction is critical. A single comment might be overlooked or dismissed as opinion, but repeated behavior, especially when documented, can establish intent and impact. Patterns are often the foundation of legal action, particularly in cases involving defamation, harassment, or interference. Melody's choice not to react publicly during this time may have been interpreted by some as disengagement or avoidance, but in hindsight, it appears more likely that it was deliberate restraint. Instead of reacting emotionally in the moment, she seemed to be watching, documenting, and collecting information. Screenshots, dates, interviews, captions, and timelines all tell a story when placed together. This kind of preparation reflects patience and foresight. In legal situations, reacting less often carries more power than reacting quickly. As time went on, the nature of public statements reportedly began to change. Some commentary moved away from expressions of personal feeling and closer to claims that could be interpreted as statements of fact. This shift matters because statements presented as fact, especially for a public figure, carry legal weight. When a person's character, parenting, or integrity is questioned repeatedly in public spaces, the impact extends beyond emotional distress. It can affect reputation, business opportunities, brand partnerships, and public trust. These are not abstract concerns. They have real-world consequences. For many observers, the situation reached a critical point when references reportedly involved Melody's children. This is often where the line is drawn, both socially and legally. Children are not public figures, they do not choose public attention, and involving them in public narratives dramatically changes how situations are evaluated. Once children enter the conversation, tolerance tends to disappear, and protection becomes the priority. Fans believe this may have been the moment when documenting behavior was no longer sufficient and formal action became necessary. Legal notices are rarely emotional decisions. They are not sent because of one bad day or one upsetting post. They are calculated, reviewed, and specific. They typically come after legal counsel examines patterns, evidence, and long-term impact. This is why Melody's move feels intentional rather than reactive. It suggests that the decision was made after reaching a point where silence alone could no longer protect her boundaries, her reputation, or her family. The timing of the legal notice is also significant. It reportedly occurred during a period when Melody was experiencing visible success. She was celebrating business wins, professional growth, and public achievements that reflected years of work and resilience. At the same time, renewed public commentary from others surfaced. Some fans believe this overlap was not coincidental, interpreting it as an attempt to redirect attention or reshape narratives during moments meant to highlight her progress. Whether intentional or not, the result was the same. Silence stopped being enough. Once the legal notice entered the picture, the shift online was immediate and noticeable. Posts became vague. Social media lives became shorter or were postponed entirely. Language changed. Words were chosen more carefully. This kind of sudden adjustment often happens when legal boundaries are introduced. It signals that consequences are now part of the equation. What once felt like unrestricted expression now carries risk, and risk changes behavior. Legal notices often focus on several key areas. Defamation is one of them, where repeated statements may damage a person's reputation, even if delivered indirectly. Harassment is another, where consistent mentions, timing, or targeting may be interpreted as unwanted behavior. Interference is also commonly addressed, particularly when public narratives impact business relationships, professional opportunities, or brand integrity. Once a legal notice is delivered, ignorance is no longer an excuse. Continued behavior after that point can be viewed as intentional, which significantly raises the stakes. What stands out most in this situation is Melody's continued restraint. She did not go online to explain herself. She did not attempt to frame the narrative. She did not seek validation or sympathy from the public. This absence of commentary makes the action feel protective rather than aggressive. It suggests the goal was not to silence others publicly, but to establish firm boundaries privately. Legal action forces decisions without spectacle. Martell and Arion are now in a position where every move matters. Continuing previous behavior could carry serious consequences. Stepping back could signal acknowledgement of boundaries. Either choice shapes the future direction of the situation. For fans, this moment changes how the entire story is viewed. What once felt like reality television drama now feels real. Lawyers, documentation, and legal language introduce a seriousness that online arguments never achieve. Public reaction has been divided. Supporters of Melody see this move as long overdue. Many interpret it as a reflection of strength, patience, and self-respect. Across social platforms, comments suggest people view this decision as a way to protect her peace, her children, and the life she has worked hard to rebuild. Her silence, paired with legal action, is seen as a powerful contrast to years of public commentary. On the other side, some argue that legal action is an attempt to control the narrative or silence opposing voices. But even that argument raises questions. If nothing inappropriate was happening, why would legal steps be necessary? That question alone shifts public perception and places pressure on those responding. The conversation changes when legal consequences enter the picture. Almost overnight, the online energy shifted. Topics that had been openly discussed for months suddenly became quiet. Planned interviews were delayed or canceled. This type of pause is often advised by legal teams, as public statements can complicate matters further. At the same time, old posts and interviews began to resurface. Statements that once seemed harmless are now being reviewed with fresh eyes and new context. Context is everything in legal situations. Timing matters, patterns matter, language matters. Melody's decision not to announce her move publicly reinforces the idea that this was not about attention. It appears focused on protection. Protecting her reputation, protecting her children, protecting the future she is building. With the legal notice, the rules have changed, even without explanation. However, for a long time, fans believed the drama surrounding Love and Marriage Huntsville had already reached its peak. Between the divorce, public interviews, online commentary, and constant speculation, it felt like every possible layer of the story had already been exposed. But the emergence of a legal notice suggests that the real story may have only just begun. The biggest questions now are not about who said what online, but why now, and what exactly does Melody want stopped immediately? Those questions alone signal that this move was not emotional or impulsive, but calculated, strategic, and far more revealing than many expected. For anyone who has followed this situation over the years, it's clear that this didn't happen overnight. The dynamic between Melody, Martell, and Arion has been slowly unraveling in public for a very long time. What began as infidelity rumors eventually evolved into public breakups, divorce proceedings, court filings, online shade, and non-stop commentary across interviews, Instagram Lives, podcasts, and fan platforms. For years, most of the chaos existed in the court of public opinion, where everyone had a version of the truth and everyone felt free to speak. This alleged legal notice marks a very different chapter, because when lawyers get involved, it usually means someone believes boundaries have been crossed in a serious, ongoing, and documentable way. To understand why Melody reportedly made this move now, it's important to look at the slow burn buildup that has been happening in plain sight. After her divorce from Martell became official, Melody made a very intentional shift. She redirected her focus toward rebuilding her life, strengthening her businesses, raising her children, and prioritizing her personal growth. What stood out most during this period wasn't what she did, but what she stopped doing. She stopped engaging in public arguments. She stopped responding to every rumor. She stopped clapping back online. From the outside, it looked like she had completely moved on and chosen peace over conflict. But while Melody remained publicly quiet, the noise around her never truly stopped. Martell continued speaking about her in interviews and on social media, often framing himself as misunderstood or unfairly judged. At the same time, Arion's online presence became increasingly pointed. Captions about being silenced, telling "my truth," and finally being heard began to appear more frequently. Initially, many fans brushed these posts off as emotional expression or frustration, but as time went on, patterns started to form that were harder to ignore. Repeated mentions began to stand out, subtle digs appeared with noticeable timing, posts and interviews seemed to align closely with Melody's milestones, such as business launches, public recognition, or moments of personal success. When behavior repeats itself consistently over time, it stops feeling coincidental. From a legal standpoint, that distinction is critical. A single post can be dismissed as opinion, but repeated behavior, documented over time, can establish intent and impact. Patterns matter, and patterns build cases. Melody's extended silence during this period may not have been avoidance at all. In fact, legally speaking, silence can be one of the most strategic responses available. Instead of reacting emotionally in the moment, she appeared to be observing, documenting, and collecting information. Screenshots, timestamps, interviews, captions, and repeated references can all be compiled into a clear narrative when placed together. That's how a legal case is built, not through emotional reactions, but through consistent documentation. This approach reflects patience and long-term thinking rather than impulsive response. As time went on, the tone of the commentary reportedly began to shift. Some statements moved away from personal feelings and closer to claims that could be interpreted as fact. That shift is extremely important. Statements presented as fact, especially about a public figure, carry legal weight. When someone's reputation, character, or parenting is questioned repeatedly in public spaces, the impact extends beyond hurt feelings. It can affect business relationships, brand partnerships, public trust, and long-term opportunities. These are real-world consequences, not just online drama. For many observers, the situation appeared to escalate when alleged references involved Melody's children and her role as a mother. This is often where the line is drawn. Children are not public figures, and involving them in public narratives changes how situations are evaluated legally and socially. What may have once been tolerated or ignored can suddenly become unacceptable. Fans believe this may have been the turning point where documenting behavior was no longer enough and formal legal action became necessary. Legal notices are rarely sent over a single post or interview. They are calculated, reviewed, and specific. They usually address patterns of behavior that have continued over time despite silence or non-engagement. That's why this move feels intentional rather than reactive. It suggests that Melody reached a point where silence alone could no longer protect her boundaries, her children, or her reputation. Recent months reportedly saw both Martell and Arion become more vocal than before. Old interviews resurfaced, new statements were made, and the language shifted from emotional expression to phrasing that could be interpreted as accusatory. Fans noticed repeated use of phrases like "my truth" and "being silenced," often appearing around the same time Melody was celebrating business wins or personal achievements. One particular interview involving Martell, paired with supportive posts from Arion, stood out to many viewers as a possible final straw. Timing matters in situations like this. Statements reportedly surfaced just as Melody was enjoying visible success, leading some fans to believe the overlap wasn't accidental. Whether intentional or not, the effect was the same. What once felt like personal commentary began to feel like a coordinated narrative, and narratives carry legal consequences. Once word of the legal notice surfaced, the shift online was immediate and noticeable. Posts became vague. Social media lives were shortened or postponed. Language softened. Words were chosen carefully. This kind of sudden adjustment is common when legal paperwork enters the picture. It signals that consequences are now part of the equation and that the freedom to speak without consideration has changed. Legal notices typically focus on three major areas. First is defamation, where repeated statements, direct or indirect, can damage someone's reputation. Second is harassment, where consistent mentions, targeting, or coordinated timing may be interpreted as unwanted behavior. Third is interference, where public narratives impact business branding, opportunities, or public perception. Once a legal notice is delivered, ignorance is no longer an excuse. Continued behavior can be viewed as willful, which dramatically changes the power dynamic. What stands out most is Melody's continued restraint. She didn't announce the legal notice publicly. She didn't post a victory caption. She didn't go live to explain herself or seek validation. That restraint makes the move feel protective rather than provocative. It wasn't about embarrassing anyone publicly, it was about drawing a firm line privately. Legal action forces decisions. Martell and Arion are now faced with choices that carry real consequences. Continuing the same behavior could escalate the situation further. Stepping back could signal acknowledgement of boundaries. Either way, the dynamics have changed permanently. For fans, this moment shifted everything. What once felt like messy reality TV drama suddenly became serious. This is no longer about who's messy or who's loudest online. It's about who has documentation, who's confident in their position, and who's prepared to face consequences. Supporters of Melody view this move as long overdue, praising her for protecting her peace, her children, and her brand without giving in to emotional reactions. On the other side, supporters of Martell and Arion argue that legal action is an attempt to control the narrative or silence opposing voices. But even within those defenses, tension exists, because one question keeps surfacing. If nothing inappropriate was happening, why involve lawyers? That question alone shifts perception from drama to credibility, responsibility, and accountability. Once the legal notice entered the picture, the online energy cooled dramatically. Topics that dominated conversations for months suddenly went quiet. Planned lives and interviews were postponed or canceled. Fans recognize that kind of silence isn't accidental, it's strategic advice. At the same time, old posts and interviews are being revisited and dissected with new eyes. Statements that once seemed harmless may now be viewed very differently when placed in context. This moment also serves as a reminder that public figures are still human. They have families, responsibilities, and reputations that extend far beyond television screens and social media timelines. When boundaries are crossed repeatedly, formal action becomes a way to stop behavior from continuing unchecked. The legal notice represents more than paperwork. It represents a decision to enforce limits that were previously ignored. For viewers, this marks a clear turning point. The story is no longer driven by who speaks the loudest or reacts the fastest. It is driven by accountability, responsibility, and long-term consequences. The focus shifts from drama to strategy. Power no longer comes from public opinion alone, but from documentation and legal standing. Melody's approach highlights an important lesson. Silence is not always weakness. Sometimes silence is preparation. Taking time to observe, document, and respond thoughtfully can be far more effective than reacting emotionally in public. Her actions reflect a long-term mindset rather than a desire for immediate validation. As this situation continues to unfold, fans are watching closely. Every detail matters now. Subtle changes in language, timing, and behavior are being noticed. The dynamics have changed permanently. Melody's quiet move has altered the direction of the entire narrative. In the end, this moment reminds everyone watching that real life does not follow reality TV rules. Actions have consequences, boundaries matter, and sometimes the strongest response is not confrontation, but quiet, decisive action.